From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. This is Honey Badger. This email is a response to your listener mail episode in regards to Walmarts being used for military storage. Feel free to let Dad Joke 69 know about this, so he'll know why there are Blackhawks being stored in Walmarts. It's true. Dad Joke 69 is a longtime listener, a good friend of the show.
He just called in very recently again.
I think a good enough rapper could just do a cadence rhyme of Blackhawks and Walmarts, you know?
Yeah. Nice Emily Dickinson slant rhyme there. Yeah, that's a good call, Noel. So Honey Badger says, I was stationed at a black site prison in Bagram, Afghanistan. I was there 2001 to 2002. The prison I worked at is no longer a secret. After Biden's glorious departure from that region, the prison has now been taken back by the Afghan people. Unclear if that glorious departure is sarcastic. Just a note, because we're getting this via text. While I was there was an inmate there named 626. That was his number. I didn't know his name. Turns out his son had turned him in for shipping unknown experimental explosive materials in shipping containers from Pakistan to the U.S. He wasn't a pleasure to have in the facility, says Honey Badger. He always yelled about how he was an American and how rich he was, blah, 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 blah. No one gave a shit. What I thought was interesting was the conversation between the higher-up officers I happened to overhear. This guy would ship fabric to the U.S., and the fabric would be sewn by his companies in the U.S., places that furnish the names like Martha Stewart, Olsen Twins clothing line, etc., etc., etc. When this material was found, it was also found that Walmart, Kmart, JCPenney, Sears, and Toys R Us were writing off the weights on the shipping containers. Which one of these companies is still flourishing to this day? Walmart. Now, let's pause here because we need to unpack what Honey Badger is telling us. He's saying that there was a guy who was turned in by his own son for shipping explosives from Pakistan to the U.S. That's the kind of thing counterintelligence really wants to know about. You know what I mean? And this dude apparently had a lot of corporate connects. And we know the story of sweatshops and weird obfuscation of brands, ultimate like producers all the time. Right. We know that a lot of, like, look at Luxottica, right? In this case, what Honey Badger is asking is how come these companies that were receiving this stuff, how come they weren't checking on the weight? Because you can predict how you can measurably and routinely predict how much a container of the same fabric every time is going to weigh. So something might have been off unless somebody was writing it off or wasn't doing their job. That's the idea. It reminds me of the great train heist in Breaking Bad. And the whole emphasis is on making the train weigh the same when it gets checked. So that is a real thing. Then Honey Badger continues and says, then there was a scratch our back and we'll scratch yours deal made, where Walmart wouldn't get shut down if the military could use a few of their places for storage. Now, it may look like on legal paper why these other places went bankrupt or whatever, but trust me, says Honey Badger, it's not the reason. Walmart did this to save their asses, and it worked. So the place where everyone spends their hard-earned paychecks was once in on some diabolical scheme against the U.S. I knew about the whole Walmart storing equipment story since the end of 2001. And when I saw the whole conspiracy evolve, I was just like, I know why. Great, huh? Kind of great, Honey Badger, if true. And Honey Badger says, want to hear here's where it gets crazy? Just last week, a friend of mine informed me that after I told him this story, that not only is Disney one of Walmart's biggest customers, but in 2002, Lilo and Stitch came out. Stitch's name was Experiment 626. Was Disney trying to tell us something? What are the chances of that? They use Easter eggs all the time, but one that goes this deep? Maybe. Who knows? Anyway, great show, guys. Big fan. Honey Badger. So the connection there is that the inmate was known as 626 and Stitch was Experiment 626. That's fascinating. I think it's also, I don't know, we'd need more to have some kind of confirmation there. But what do you guys think about the idea of a backroom deal of this sort between Walmart and Uncle Sam? Like Walmart got caught shipping terrorist supplies?
Well, okay, so let's
lot.
Yeah, let's go back to the original message that we got way back in the day from Dad Joke. It was a message that it was a building, not necessarily a Walmart. It was a large building that was no longer an existing superstore, like a Kmart or a Walmart or one of those. And it was being rented out by the people that own the property to, I believe it was the Coast Guard, maybe the National Guard, but the military. They were renting it out to them so that they could store their equipment there. It wasn't as though Walmart, the company, signed a deal with the Coast Guard to store their Black Hawk helicopters. Mm-hmm. At least that's my understanding. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a, not to poke holes in Honey Badger's story, but it does feel like there's not a bigger conspiracy there necessarily.
Right. It's fun to explore, though, because it also gives us an opportunity to talk about the importance of drilling down into the logistics of these things. So a lot of these large entities subcontract. They don't necessarily own the shipping containers, or they don't necessarily own a cargo ship. What they do is they own an agreement with one of these pieces, one of these links in the supply chain. And a company the size of Walmart, by any given metric, has a tremendous ability to dictate the terms of those deals. But the reason I'm talking about this, about the size and the panoply of different entities that may be involved in the supply chain, is that it is possible that Walmart did not have any clue, right? Even if something sketchy was on one of their ships or on a container that was marked, this is destined for Walmart in Tupelo Falls, West Dakota, which is not a real place unless that game Control is real, which I hope. Anyhow, the idea then is that it becomes the concept of watching every falling sparrow, or it becomes the concept of a whale not being explicitly aware of every single little piece of algae, or whatever smaller thing you want to imagine, a diatom even. But somehow the law enforcement found these claims credible, and they locked this guy up. At this time, Afghanistan, very dangerous place. Pakistan, a known hotbed for fomenting terrorist acts, or fomenting terrorist operations, I should say. So there, like that part of the story, it seems to me that there could be sand, because that happens pretty often. It happens more often than is reported in like your local CBS News or whatever. But the idea that Uncle Sam would find out about something like this and then find out about Walmart's involvement and then say, hey, we've got you by the jimmies. I don't know if that's a real term.
Absolutely it is. They call a condom in the UK?
What, a jimmy?
Well, they call it a Johnny, actually, but they hear that.
A Johnny.
You ever heard rappers, sometimes they call it a Jimmy hat?
Oh, yeah, I have. Okay. Well, they've got you by the condoms. But the idea is, like, that idea is interesting, but I think we would need a little more explicit info there. But still, yeah, it is true. There is a lot of military hardware out there in the U.S. It's put in all sorts of places, and there are reasons for that, right? And as later conspiracy realists pointed out, it's not as if you can kick in the door of an abandoned Walmart holding Blackhawks and then just like push one out the door and then fly it off as like cool in Grand Theft Auto as that would be. The reality is that those things are purposely like decommissioned, or components are purposely not removed necessarily, but they're like purposely disassembled to a degree, partially to maybe fit them in there, and then partially because they don't want the local yokel crew to pop in and then and then be the next Florida man, right? Florida man steals Black Hawk helicopter along with Gator's sidekick. That's unfair. Check out our episode on why that's unfair. We figured out the mystery of Florida man, and it is depressing and sad. But this brings us, I think, also to a larger conversation. Like, most folks don't like to think about those black site prisons. And Honey Badger, you brought this up as a fact, which I greatly appreciate, because for a long time they were not treated as fact by the very same government that was creating them. And when we ask ourselves why people don't trust large government entities, it's because their track record is terrible over time. Their track record of being transparent with the public is terrible. And it's something that we dive deeper than ever before into. It's something that we can tell you about hopefully very soon. But trust us when we say that. We already were pretty convinced, and now we walked away absolutely convinced. You should always question this government, any government. Just do some digging as soon as you have time, because everything is being told to you through a series of filters. And that's not like governments have to do this sort of stuff. Secrecy is part of it. It'd be like having a pizza without cheese to not have secrecy. It's part of, what makes a pizza.